All right, so what are some of the themes that you heard in that musical rendition of this famous speech? Actually, what speech is this an excerpt of? I Have a Dream speech? What speech is it? Okay, I have to tell you. Now, this is one of the things that if we're going to be serious about doing this business, we got to be serious about doing this business. So, Martin Luther King had more than one famous speech. And the one we typically, that's been rammed down our throat is what? The I Have a Dream speech. Right? So this was an excerpt from his Birmingham speech. Right? No, not his Birmingham speech, his Memphis speech. So the thing that I find most remarkable about this particular speech and how that relates to what we're going to talk about today is because this was, okay, so first of all, what were some of the things that you heard him talk about in this excerpt? This isn't the whole speech, this is just pieces of it. What were some of the things that you heard?
The thing that struck me is that I may not get there with you.
I may not get there with you. Get where?
Eerie foreshadowing.
What get where? To the promised land. So he says, I may not get there with you to the promised land. Now, we'll come back to that in just a minute. The thing that sends chills down my spine every time I hear this is that he delivers the speech the night before he's assassinated. So the next morning he has his oatmeal, he puts on his pants, he walks outside the Lorraine Hotel, bam, it's gone. But the night before he prophesied, he said, I might not go with you to the promised land. Now, I find it very interesting that he uses this imagery of the promised land. And he said, I won't make it, I may not make it with you, but you will make it to the promised land. Now, we're talking about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Why do you think he's using promised land? Why is he using that? Why does he say nirvana? How come he's not saying, to the place of racial justice? But he selects his words very carefully and says promised land. Why?
Equity.
Equity? Okay. What were you going to say, ma'am?
No, just similar, but I mean, he's speaking in some places as a reference and making reference to Moses. He might not make it, but his people were going to get there.
So he's making a reference to himself being Moses leading who? His people. And who were Moses' people? The Israelites. Right? So he's making this direct parallel. And he's saying, just as Moses did not make it into the promised land, I may not make it with you. However, I watch, every Easter, I watch the Ten Commandments, so I know the story, right? Charlton Heston, out of my cold day, let my people go, right? So they get out of the land of Egypt. Moses takes them to the place that he can take them, and then Moses is taken off the scene, and the people do what? Do they go into the promised land? Or do they say, oh, Moses isn't here, let's go back to Egypt and go back into bondage and slavery? Would you? Would you rather be back in bondage and slavery or try to get into this promised land, this land that's, right? So Moses is taken off the scene. Dr. King is taken off the scene. But Dr. King says the same thing that Moses said. I won't get there, but you will. Now, the interesting thing is, if we follow the rest of the story, what ends up happening is that the children of Israel get to the promised land, and they see it, and they're like, ooh. But they're like, we want to know what we're going to get into. So they send spies into the land, or they send surveyors to the land. And so 2 surveyors come back with their report. And their report is, man, Moses is right. This is the land of milk and honey. There are grapes the size of a man's hand. We have to go over there and seize this land. But then there were some other spies who came and said, ooh, yeah, it is milk and honey over there. And there are grapes the size of a man's hand. At the same time, there are giants and monsters over there. And so what do you think Moses' wishes would have been? Do you think Moses would have wished for them to say, you know what, those monsters, don't deal with those, just go back to Egypt and become slaves? What do you think, right? Moses wouldn't have wanted that for them. So what do you think ultimately they decided to do? They decided to forge ahead. They decided that their strength was going to be greater than the monsters that they had to deal with, the scary stuff that they had to deal with in this new promised land. Now, nobody told them that the promised land would be an easy place to live or to accomplish, but they decided within their hearts that they would go into this promised land. Now they enter into this promised land, but Moses isn't there. So now the leadership has a problem. What do you think the leadership's problem is as they enter into this promised land? I'm getting to my topic, so I don't want you to think I'm on a rabbit trail. So what do you think their biggest problem is now? Who's going to run the ship? And what do you think people are saying about their experience prior to the promised land? So Joshua and Caleb decided that they could lead the people. And so what do you think, what's the commentary about their leadership style? What do you think the people are saying about their leadership style? You're no Moses. Moses would have done it this way. He made sure that, birds were falling from heaven and that bread, manna was here for us. He made water come out of a rock. You're no Moses. So what do you think the first challenge of their leadership was to do? One of the things that Joshua and Caleb had to do is they had to remind the people of something that they already knew. They had to remind the people that Moses is dead. It's a harsh reality. Dr. King is dead. I thank him for everything that he did. Those people who marched with him, I salute them. I give my homage. I give my respect to them. But that movement is dead. So now we're in this promised land. The great leader that we had is dead. Whose responsibility now is it to walk out the promise that was given to us in this promised land? Each of ours. Will there be another Dr. Martin Luther King? If you're looking for him, then miss him because he's you. Will there be another Gandhi? There will never be another Gandhi. Will there be another Mother Teresa? There'll never be another Teresa. Mother Teresa. Will there be another you? There will never be another you. The task that is before us in seizing this promised land